Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. I'm so excited for you to listen to today's podcast episode where we have Perrin White with us, who is a speech language pathologist, a certified orofacial myologist, a registered yoga teacher, and breath coach. Perrin talks to us about her own personal journey with navigating airway health and how she's so deeply motivated to support her clients truly connecting to their breath and their bodies to learn how to live better. You can read more about Perrin in the show notes as well as how to get in contact with her. I walked away from this episode so excited and more curious about my breath in different ways. My background in being a Pilates instructor as well as meditation teacher, I have a specific relationship to my breath. And learning about the breath from more of the structure of what's happening in our nose and our mouth and our tongue was really empowering for me. And so I know you will leave this episode with so much awareness and education of what might be happening inside of your own tongue, mouth, and body that can empower you to take charge of your health in your own way. So let's settle into this episode and let's get centered. Before we dive into today's interview, I'm really excited to celebrate with you that my new interactive self-care journal, 100 Mindful Moments to Balance and Energize, is coming out soon. So stay in the know by signing up with the link in the show notes to be the first to know when it's out, as well as how to join a free community that is empowering us all to make self-care a priority so that we know self-care is smart. It's not selfish, and it's a way that we can care for ourselves proactively in our life, not only so that we ourselves feel amazing, but more importantly, that we have capacity to show up as a human, as a mom, as a parent, as a daughter, as a friend, as a neighbor in this world. And so the time is now for this book, and I'm so excited for it to be coming to you very soon. So learn more in the show notes or check out wadebrill.com/100 mindful moments to join the waitlist. Perrin, welcome to the Center in the City podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Wade.
I want to kick us off with one of my famous questions. What does being centered mean to you?
Ooh, well, great question, especially with the name of your podcast. And I usually like to answer questions with a story. So what I can tell you I've been working on recently is a mindset called double bubble self-care. And I was recently in Costa Rica for a mindfulness retreat, and the message I just kept getting over and over is double bubble, baby, like double bubble. And maybe it's even double your bubble. And really what I'm talking about is energy hygiene and feeling confident within your body and knowing your boundaries. And I just really love saying double bubble because it makes me smile. And if I can get some kind of joy linked to the mantra meditation or mindset I'm trying to emulate, it sticks. So double bubble to me is centered, meaning it doesn't matter what the hell is going on around you. And in fact, you never have control over what's going around you, but you always have a say in how you're feeling, how you react, and especially how you're breathing. And that's where my main focus is the breathing component, because that's always within your control. It's one of those rare things that you do automatically, but you also have conscious volitional input and can modulate and change and radiate how long to breathe, the depth of your breath, the essence of your breath, the ease of your breath. And that is what keeps me centered and especially helps me create these double bubbles or double bubbles, especially when you get yourself into a scenario where you know it's going to be hard or challenging or uncomfortable. And it's just allowing me to stay present. So great first question. And the answer is double bubble. Also, funny story, my friend bought me this like 600 piece container of the double bubble gum, and it literally is on my it's on my mantle in my den, and it's so out of place, but it makes me laugh every time. So find the things that remind you to stay centered as you also continue to embody and practice what you're trying to become.
I love that imagery of the double bubble specifically. I was just having a client session last week around my client was going to visit a triggering parent, and it was like, remember what we worked on around creating that bubble of protection energy. I love the double bubble and the double bubble gum
Right,
visual because it's so fun to bring that joy, as you mentioned, into your
right.
practice, to take something that feels like serious and that I have to like manage this unpleasant thing and just to bring some lightness to it.
And the thing about double is I heard this forever and ever, and I didn't really understand it till I started practicing it. But let's say you only have time for like, you think, excuse me, air quotes, you think you only have time for like 5 minutes. That is the universe, that is your body, that is the environment you're in screaming at you, please take 10 minutes. And so the fact of the double is just that reinforcement of you need the care, the practice before it's actually required so that you don't crumble. And the double bubble component or the double your bubble component is how do you reinforce the bare minimum? And it's practicing it before you need it. And going back to the breathing, you have to practice correct breathing patterns before they're actually required from a neuro pathway standpoint and a muscle memory standpoint. If you don't practice it, it doesn't happen. And as far as energy hygiene goes, and as far as breathing goes, you have to at least give your body a chance to know that language, to know that path, and give it the support it needs so that you don't, let's talk about like a budget, an energy budget. If you give out all your energy, you're done. Like there's only a certain amount that you have in your bank account, your energy bank account. And when it's done, it's done. So the double component really is to make sure you don't completely burn out. That's that's not what we're going for.
Yeah, I always say like you can't learn to swim in a tsunami.
Oh no.
So it's like having that time and space proactively to practice. Like,
Mhm.
how do we get to build these skills and build these muscle memories and, as you're saying, neural pathways so that it's we have the tools in our tool bag. We know how to use them or when to use them. We might not use them perfectly, and that's okay, but we at least know they're there or they're semi-sharp or they're useful. So how did you get into this world?
So nothing's in a vacuum. And I'm now 40 years old. So this has been 40 years in the making. And I will say it's a combination of both professional and personal experience. From the professional experience, my background is in speech pathology, and I've been a licensed speech language pathologist since 2011. Um, I think that's beautiful because if we don't understand the language, whether it's, I'm skipping ahead, but whether it's the language of your breath or your body or what's physically being spoken or the nonverbal language, it's really hard to communicate. So I love that I have that foundation. I later became certified in orofacial myology, starting first in 2017, the course to like the path to become certified, but I didn't understand it because I had all this dysfunction in myself, including tongue tie, upper lip tie, buccal ties, tongue thrust swallow, deviated septum, nasal turbinates and large tonsils. But of course, I didn't know this. And the added layer on top of that is I'm the daughter of a dentist, and he's the one that first told me about myofunctional therapy. My dad, John, Dr. John White. He told me about it, but of course, there's complications within families too. So I knew this word, but I couldn't embody it yet because I didn't realize I was coming from a place of dysfunction. And I think this is a really crucial part when you're finding and searching for the right providers. I always like to ask, what is your personal connection to this issue? Because if they don't at least have a loved one or a child or a family member or a friend or someone that they have a personal connection with, it's going to be really hard for them to fully, truly grasp the entirety of the issue. So I first started in 2017 learning about myofunctional therapy. It wasn't until 2019-20 that I actually retook the introductory course after I'd gone through all my own um, airway journey surgeries, which included a septoplasty, turbinate reduction, tonsillectomy, and then a tongue tie release, upper lip tie, and buccal tie releases. This is all at age 34. And what really started that is I kept getting recurrent strep throat. And I was starting to learn about myofunctional therapy, and I knew enough to go to the ENT. And when they said, well, you have inflamed turbinates and your septum's deviated and your tonsils are inflamed, I had just enough information from an outside source, secondary to what the ENT was telling me, to know that this is important. And once I finally went through the airway surgery with my nose, tonsils, and turbinates, and I was able to breathe, it just opened my eyes and humbled me in a way that you really can't fully articulate. And it mostly was the stepping stone to say, all right, if I've been wrong about how I've been breathing, what else have I been wrong about? And it allowed me to be very real about, oh, I'm not swallowing correctly. Oh, no wonder I thought myofunctional therapy was bullshit because I couldn't do any of it. And it gave me the insight to say, like, okay, I'm scared because I don't want to be wrong, but I've already been wrong. So let's see what I can get right by readdressing some of these concerns. So through the tongue tie release, lip tie, and buccal ties, and going back and getting the full credentialing with myofunctional therapy really gave me the certified orofacial myology credentialing and personal connection. And then as far as like spirituality goes and understanding the mindfulness component over 2020, during those really fun COVID years, I got even more into yoga than I was before. I'd say before I was just a casual yogi going to classes for like good stretch or maybe a good workout, look good in some yoga pants. But through the teacher training, I started seeing all these Venn diagrams overlap in my head. And that's when I know that I'm onto something. So it's talking about pranayama and your chi and all the essence of life, which is your breathing. And there's even books that I found later on that go into like Kundalini awakenings with the bandhas of the tongue rest posture. And I'm like, whoa, this is the same thing being said in a different language. And understanding that yoga and speech and myofunctional therapy, they all have an overlap, and that is the breath. And that's where it really started clicking. I also got my Oxygen Advantage advanced breath work coaching certification through that. I really like that program because it gives a lot of scientific background with it. And then I was able to put my personal spin, and I call it functional breath work, making sure that I always involve myofunctional therapy component, which really is tongue rest posture. There's a lot of nasal unblocking and nasal hygiene, as well as diaphragmatic engagement. So those three components are always part of any breathwork practice. And then the part that I'm only now really comfortable speaking about that truly makes me so proud of what I've built is my daughter. So in 2017, I delivered a 7-month stillborn. I only knew about her for 3 weeks. It was a complete shock. And then, oh God, I didn't even go. Prior to that, I just completed or stopped a 10-year, yeah, decade, a 10-year Adderall use. So I was going through rehab. And then I also found out I was pregnant as I'm like trying to figure out my standing and like, how do I actually live in the world? So it's like understanding sleep disorder breathing causes really severe and extremely impactful negative lifestyles. And that's where the Adderall came in from my ADHD diagnosis from sleep disorder breathing. So then I get through that. And then I have Leona because she was supposed to be due on my birthday. And I'm a Leo. And so she was a girl. So Leona, and that's July 1st. And I slowly started taking care of myself to take care of her. So even though she wasn't physically with me, I started putting on the hat or the mindset of I need to be a good mom. So it gave me something outside of myself to focus on in a whole different way, not just like my clients as a speech language pathologist, but truly like that mama bear instinct, except it was me just trying to heal myself. And what I really believe now is she was my younger self. So I got to essentially reparent who I was. And anything that I didn't want to say to my daughter, Leona, I wouldn't say to myself. Anything I would say to my daughter to like encourage her, I said to myself. Anything that I would want for her, I did for myself. And I slowly just built this life that I felt like would take care of us both. And this is what gives me the most chills is understanding like Adderall addiction is hard. Rehab is hard. Child loss is hard. And I am so grateful for all of them. And I can say that now because I'm far enough removed and I've done the work. And it doesn't mean that I don't have hard days, but what I can tell you is the breath. The breath is what's caught me and saved me and continues to strengthen me through the whole time. And what I'm talking about the breath is sometimes a scientific, physiological, anatomical approach. Like I can notice my heart rate raising. I can notice that my thoughts are like speeding up, a little ADHD, like a little manic. And that's a really good indicator. Whoa, Perrin, we're slowing it down. We're going to take a 4-7-8 breath maybe 5 times, see how we feel, shake it off, then move on. And then I also know like when something's hard and a more emotional or spiritual component, and you can call that like electricity or the essence or the spirit or God or, your guardian angels or your healer. I mean, you use whatever word you want. The language I'm less concerned with, more and I'm more so concerned with the essence. But essentially, when it gets down to that deeper component, that's when I physically or literally or metaphorically, whichever way you want to say, I just talk to Leo and I'm like, what are we doing with this? What are you here to teach me? What do I need to pay attention to? What are you what are you telling me that I'm not getting? And I just sit with it. And I love the idea of not understanding and it being okay because I'll get it when it's time, just like it took me 7 years to really fully understand, oh, Leona was the best gift I've ever been given. But the thing about gifts is you have to actually make it through to reap the rewards. And then the reward is the connection and the modeling and the ability to show others that resilience and refinement is absolutely possible.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And what a journey it sounds like it's been. And so many, I hear you, and like those shitty life things that happen, how they end up being our biggest teachers and biggest motivators in life. And in the midst of it, you're like, how is this going to support me in the future? You're so in it, you've no ability to see above it, but it's true. And it sounds like you are living proof of really being able to use your resiliency to climb out of those various different challenges and learn to incorporate the lessons in life. I want to just circle back to something you shared in the beginning of like once you got diagnosed with all of the things that were happening in your mouth and facial structures and throat, what did it feel like afterwards to breathe? Like, could you feel a shift in your breath? If so, what was that like for you? Or how did your body even respond, your nervous system respond to it?
Really great question. And what I'll preface it with is the hard part about describing the breath is it's such an experience. And it really took me experiencing the different breath to even like air quotes fully get it because you can't try on my experience and I can't try on your experience. So I'll try to articulate it as best I can. But what I can tell you is once I had the stents removed from my septoplasty, that was the first time I had like an immediate shift of what I know now as my blood cells were better oxygenated and the gas exchange was actually doing its job and able to operate correctly. What my body felt was almost, God, this is like hard to describe it. I know I started crying and I know my mom was with me and I could tell she could tell that I was different, that something was different. And that was the first moment that I felt like, oh, my body is becoming aligned. Like my body is becoming balanced. My body is connecting to my breath. And I work really hard to teach clients and with myself to get that brain body breath connection. And it's so important, but it's also so hard to connect if you're having difficulty regulating your nervous system. So that was the first moment when the stents came out, like a couple of weeks after my septoplasty and airway surgery. And then everything else has just been this slow build. So that was the first time I had, probably the first and the only time that I really was like, whoa, this is big. And I feel like I needed something really big and very contrast to what I was experiencing prior to like wake me up. And that was it. And everything else, like from tongue rest posture to diaphragmatic engagement to nasal unblocking, those have just been like gradual builds where honestly I keep a list of important dates and what's been going on in my life, like all the way back to all the way probably like 2000. And it's through reading the things that I've accomplished that I'm able to really understand, oh, I'm doing great. Or it's like those moments where you have a deja vu, you're like, whoa, I handled this so much better than I have in the past. And so it's a combination of like the very in your face noticing and then the subtle refinements over time that cumulatively make a much drastically different experience. And so I'm never going to be able to fully do it justice. And honestly, you're the first person that's asked me like, how did I feel after those surgeries to breathe? And so I'm gonna have to ponder on that a little bit more, but I just know that it was profound enough that my body woke up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I have asthma and
Mm.
I had more serious childhood asthma, and to not be able to breathe is, I mean, obviously, like our breath is our life. And so I've had experiences as a child where I've been rushed to the hospital because of having an asthma attack. And what that feels like when it gets activated or when constriction happens. And so when you actually can breathe, it's like, oh, what a gift, or even uh, if, living in Seattle and there's been really bad forest fires and the air quality has been horrible, and going outside and not being able to breathe, you take those moments for granted, right? You take fresh air for granted. I'll say, I take my breath for granted sometimes. And yet our breath is such a gift. It is our life force. You talk about something that I want to make sure we touch on, and you highlight tongue rest posture.
Okay.
And I had never heard of this before. And I'd love for you to explain it to listeners. And I have so many follow-up questions around it.
So I know this is a audio medium, so I won't use my diagrams, but essentially I'm just going to walk you through correct tongue rest posture to begin with, and then we'll talk about it. So if you're driving, don't close your eyes, but if you're sitting, you can gently close your eyes. If you're somewhere safe where you can do so, do that. You also can start to hone in your awareness of your tongue. And I want you to think about the tip, the interior third, the meat, which is the middle, the medial, and then the back that's closest to your throat. And with your teeth slightly apart, so unclenching your jaw and your lips gently sealed, soften your face. And then I want you to rest the tip of your tongue, elevate it to right behind your two front teeth where you say na 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 na. And let that be your anchor. Let that be your focal point. And maybe that's all you can do right now, and that's okay. But if you're able to lift the tip of your tongue, not touching your teeth, but a millimeter or two behind it to your incisive papilla, which we call the spot, I then invite you to see if you can lift maybe the middle and some of the back of your tongue up to your palate as well. And remember to unclench your jaw, soften your face. Keep refining so that you find correct alignment with ease. And wherever you find your tongue up to your palate, maybe it's just the tip, Maybe it's the blade. Maybe it's just 2/3. Whatever you're able to. Now slowly breathe in through your nose, noticing the cool air enter. And even slower exhale through your nose, noticing the warm air exit. Soften the shoulders. Soften maybe 1% more in the neck. And this probably will feel uncomfortable if you've never done it, and that's to be expected. But just remember that you did it once and you can do it again as you start to introduce a new neural pathway, a new posture for your tongue, your lips, your jaw to invite. And with this new tongue rest posture, this new oral rest posture, notice how your breathing changes. Notice how your thoughts may slow. And possibly even notice how you get more expansion in the ribs and the belly as the diaphragm contracts with each breath in. And more control of the belly and the diaphragm as you slowly exhale out. And you can continue just listening to my words, or if you want to gently flutter the eyes open, you now have experienced oral rest posture. And oral rest posture is what we refer to in myofunctional therapy as where I want your tongue, your lips, your jaw to be resting. I want the tongue fully sealed up to your palate. Teeth are not touching, they're about 1 millimeter or 2 apart from the uppers and lowers, so that unclenches the jaw. And lips are sealed because I want you to be a nasal breather with correct tongue rest posture. And the reason the tongue is so important is directly behind it is your throat. And while we have all these hard structures like your hard palate and your jaw and your maxilla, the throat is a lot of soft tissue. And when you are breathing in, you're pulling in negative pressure into the nose. And when you breathe out, positive pressure exits the nose. Well, to keep the airway, the oral pharyngeal space, which is essentially the space behind the throat, so you've got the pharynx and the larynx and the oral structures. Essentially, it's where your uvula is. That's when you look in your mouth. It looks like a little punching bag in the way far, far back. For all those structures, those soft tissue structures to stay open, to allow air in and out, you have to create correct intraoral pressure. And that's what we do with the support of the tongue fully up to the palate. And it's kind of like a foot filling the sole of a shoe. I don't want it squunched up there, and I don't want it like balled up and full of tension. I want it fully sealed. And that allows the air to then move up and down behind the throat with ease. What it also does is it creates the structure and stability you need in your palate. And the roof of the mouth, which is the palate, is the floor of the nose. So wherever your tongue is resting, particularly at night, is going to change the shape of your face. We know that you need 6 hours of consistent light pressure for teeth movement. And when you're younger, anyone that sucked their thumb or mouth breathed or snored or had like a lovey in their mouth knows that it impacts your face. Or maybe they don't know, but I'm telling you it does. And that's what crowded teeth are. It's a changing of the shape of your face. It makes your palate high and narrow. And if your palate is high and narrow, the roof of your mouth, you better believe the floor of the nose is going to be impacted. And that's where deviated septums can evolve from. That's where inflamed or enlarged nasal turbinates can come from. That's where basically inadequate nasal airway space. That's at least one of them. And then you're more prone to mouth breathe because the nose is not able to do its job. And you only have 2 options for breathing, it's nose and mouth. So when you're younger, we're really talking about oral rest posture for development. When you're older, it's more for stability. And then additionally, where your tongue rests, the connections of the tongue link up to your jaw. So if you have TMJD, if you clench, if you grind, if you have bruxism, you better believe your tongue is playing a part of it. And I guarantee you, if you start to strengthen your tongue, if you start to change your tongue rest posture, and rest referring to when you're not eating, talking, or drinking. So those are the active roles of the tongue. when you're not actively using it, you're resting it. They all play a major, major, major part in the way that your mouth, your nose, your whole oral complex is functioning for speaking, swallowing, and breathing.
Oh my God, thank you for dropping all of that knowledge. And
Yeah.
I can feel my tongue tired
Uh-huh.
from like I can feel that muscle being flexed. So it's really interesting. And I feel sensations in the roof of my mouth right now that I'm like, huh, what's is that just pressure? Is that like, what's happening there? And you highlighted a few things that I personally manage of my own of one, I started to do mouth taping. I am not consistent with it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. But I started because of having a conversation with my dentist around I mouth breathe sometimes. And it's specifically because my nose gets congested. And I think that has to do more with allergies because it doesn't happen in every bed. It only happens in certain beds. And I also try to track, like, did I have more dairy at night or, what's creating some of the inflammation in my body. But I've done some mouth taping to support trying to be more of a nose breather than a mouth breather. And then I also grind my teeth, and I've grinded my teeth since I was like 12.
Yeah,
I'm really good about wearing a retainer because I
yeah.
want to protect my teeth. But yeah, like, so what are your thoughts on mouth taping and what can people do like myself who notice they might be struggling with mouth breathing at various times in their day, whether it's sleeping or even breathing throughout the day? Like sometimes I had a client that I know noticed she ate really fast
Mhm.
because she couldn't really breathe through her nose. And so that was affecting her mindful eating practice. And we
Mhm.
talked about that. And so I feel like there's so much connection here.
Let's break these down. First, let's just talk about mouth tape. Mouth tape is lip training and it's training your lips to stay closed. But what has to work successfully for your lips to stay closed? Because you only have two modes of breathing, nose and mouth, and your body is not going to let you die. It knows intuitively when it's hard to breathe, and that's why you have backup. So you should predominantly be a nose breather, but if there's issues in your nose, you have the mouth. Now, mouth taping, really it's kinesio tape or medical tape to basically keep the upper lip and the lower lip closed together. The tongue rest posture is paramount to making that successful. Fully sealing your tongue up to your palate and keeping it there, which is what I work on with clients. And also understand the tongue is actually 8 different muscles. It is quite complex. We take it for granted, just like we take good breathing for granted. A lot goes into it. So if you can't get your tongue up to your palate, that is a very clear sign to get a myofunctional therapy evaluation. Secondly, if you can get your tongue up to your palate and you can keep your lips closed with the mouth tape because you're training your lips to stay closed, which I also recommend doing during the day first for like 3 minutes at a time, then changing your posture. So first have it like while you're watching TV, then maybe have it while you're laying down, then maybe try it during a nap, then try it at night. So your body again has that pathway, that familiarity. So it actually knows what to do and it knows it's not a threat. So you can actually go to sleep. The other component with mouth tape is you've got to make sure your nose works. And so what I would say with nasal congestion, I love that you're looking into dairy. I am not a nutritionist, but I can tell you very clearly whatever you put into your body, whether it's air or thoughts or food, plays a part. So get curious and clear and get help from nutritionists to weed out those possible inflammations or markers of distress in your body from the food aspect. What I can tell you that is within my realm of professional credentialing is I look for turbinates, inflamed turbinates. I look for deviated septums. And then what I would say with you specifically is we've got to do some nasal unblocking and some gas exchange retraining. So essentially working on intermittent mini breath holds with uh, I'm forgetting the words, but essentially we would slowly build up. So maybe you hold it for 5 seconds and then 10 seconds and then 11 and 12, 13, whatever. And then we also increase your physical activity while you're doing breath holds, always coming back to a nasal breathing. Highly recommend looking into Oxygen Advantage. That taught me so much about how to do this. I also treat clients and help them with their nasal breathing as well as nasal hygiene. I tell pretty much everyone, just try a breathe right strip. If it helps, it's a pretty clear sign there might be something structural in there. And yes, probably allergies is part of it, but I'd say like humidifiers, nasal sprays, neti pots, there's all sorts of things you can do. So as far as your case with mouth taping, you always try it during the day. You always make sure your tongue can rest in the right place. You don't go directly to sleep with it because that's going to freak your body out and talk about unhelpful nervous system regulation for sleeping. Second, as far as the grinding and clenching goes, that usually is a sign of insufficient airway space behind the throat. So the body does not want you to die and won't let you die. So if your tongue is not in the right place, to keep your airway open. When you go to sleep on your back in that supine position, gravity takes a hold and starts to pull things back into that soft tissue, which is where you get sleep apnea, upper airway resistance. And essentially, it's narrowing the space within that soft tissue, making it difficult to nasal breathe and also just breathe in general. So, what the body does is it brings the jaw forward so that it physically creates more space behind the tongue. And this is one of the reasons or causes for bruxism. Clenching, I think, is more so the body trying to find stability and grounding by just holding on for dear life. But at least the bruxism absolutely is contributed or absolutely is influenced by insufficient airway space. There also can be stress, but that usually has to do with poor breathing, which is probably because you have poor sleep and it's a catch-22. And then I forgot what else you asked me about.
Well, these are all, this is, I mean, so juicy. I mentioned, like, I have a client who
Oh, the
would
mom.
have trouble eating and noticed she ended up eating really fast because it was not from a sense of time pressure or anxiety, but it was literally because of breathing. It was she had to get the food in her mouth quickly so she could actually chew.
So that is absolutely an airway, nasal airway issue. I'd send her to the ENT. I'd also work on retraining her nasal breathing and working on those mini breath holds. I also would strengthen her jaw because I'm curious if her jaw actually gets tired, so her body's trying to speed it up. So if and the thing that's interesting is if you're a clencher or a grinder, you probably have very pronounced jaw masseter muscles. It doesn't mean they're strong. It just means they're stressed. And so I do a lot of resistance training with, they look like dog toys, but they're resistive chewing tools. I use that for my 3-year-old clients. I also use that with my 75-year-old clients. And you want to strengthen all the muscles that are necessary. So to be able to chew and breathe and swallow appropriately, you need sufficient jaw strength and stability and stamina to make it through a whole meal. Let's say you're actually eating steak and real food, then you got to chew all that stuff up. And then you've got to be able to lateralize your tongue. You've got to be able to elevate your tongue. You've got to be able to create a bowl for the bolus, which is the food that you're chewing. You've got to be able to elevate your tongue and create the correct initiation of peristalsis, which is the muscle movement to be able to lift your tongue, collect the collect the contents, and then swallow appropriately. Also, you can't swallow and breathe simultaneously, so you've got to be able to get the coordination of your swallow with your breathing. And this is also assuming that your nose is working. So when I look at clients, I'm always looking at dysfunction for speaking, breathing, swallowing, and those are called orofacial myofunctional disorders. It's an umbrella that looks at the function for those three activities. And they're important because they utilize the same muscles. And I guarantee you there's usually two of those that are impacted. It could be one, it could be two, it could be all three, but normally it's probably two. And it usually is airway and swallowing, or airway and speech. But really, it's usually airway and swallowing, and then maybe airway, swallowing, and speech simultaneously.
How do you think the use of technology, what I really mean by that is all of us humans glued to our phones, looking down, kind of hunching over, chin down, is affecting our jaw structure, our facial structure, and therefore affecting our breath?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to answer it with a story because it makes me laugh, maybe because I'm weird, but actually I love weird. So yes, I'm weird and I own it. I remember in one of my practicum sites, we were working at a skilled nursing home, and lots of clients and patients there are elderly and they've had strokes, and lots of people with strokes are at risk of aspiration, which means they swallow food but it goes into their airway. So one of the techniques we taught them to swallow safely without the risk of aspiration is called a chin tuck, where literally you have your food, you're about to swallow it, you tuck your chin to your chest, then you swallow, because it physically closes off your airway space and directs the food into the esophagus. Now, what I see are people doing chin tucks all the time, and they're wondering why they're stressed. I also know that technology is meant to be consumed in moderation. Am I perfect at this? Hell no. Am I very well aware of it? Hell yes. Because I notice that I have very real conversations with myself when I'm on my phone too much. I also have very real conversations with myself with what posture am I in as I'm consuming said Instagram or technology. So it's twofold. One, the posture of your body impacts the space you have to breathe. So really, it's a real estate issue. If you bring your chin to your chest, there is less real estate for you to breathe, period. Period. And if you are consuming too much of this stimuli that is dysregulating, your breathing will be impacted, period. And you combine both of them together, that is called, you need double, 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 double bubble help and support. So it's, and the thing that's amazing is you can change all of these things with awareness. You're not meant to change it overnight, because that's too much. The body, the nervous system loves slow motion. So baby refinements, slow steps gradually over time. Maybe you just limit the time you're on your phone, and maybe you start to pay attention, like, hey, how's my back? Where are my shoulders? Where's my tongue? I literally always say, where's your tongue? My hashtag, my favorite ones, where's your tongue? Just start thinking, where are things in space and time, and then how long have I been doing this? So whatever you practice will become your pattern, and your pattern then becomes your way of life.
Oh my God, Perrin, this is so helpful and insightful because, I think a lot of us take our breath for granted or just think of, oh, I'm only going to breathe consciously when I'm on a yoga mat or when I'm sitting in meditation, but how important it is to ask yourself, where's your tongue? I ask my clients all the time, like, where are your feet? Where are your feet?
Yeah.
To help us be in the present moment. So I love that invitation to ask, where's your tongue? Thank you so much for being here. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Oh, thank you, Wade. I'm most active as far as social media goes on Instagram, and my handle is at Breathe Well, Be Well. That's BREATHE, Breathe Well, Be Well. You also can find me at my website. That's breathewellbewell.info. And through there, you can book a discovery call if you're interested in learning more. I work with clients virtually and in person if you're in Greenville, South Carolina. But if not, I am your breath coach wherever you are. So start with a discovery call. That really is, that's an intro. Like, we got to make sure we can work together. I know I can help you, but we got to make sure we're a good fit. And that's really where the work starts, is just reaching out for help.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Wade.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Centered in the City podcast. As you let all that information and those insights settle, I welcome you to think about what's one takeaway you have from today that you want to integrate into your life. Maybe it's you want to practice your own tongue rest posture throughout the day. Maybe you want to try mouth taping and go slow, titrate the experience. As Perrin said, start with just a few hours a day and then maybe try to mouth tape at night. Are you wanting to be conscious of your posture when you're using technology and notice how that affects your breath? Or maybe you gained some other insight of what's happening to your breath or your nasal passage or your throat during this conversation, and you're curious to learn more about yourself and your body. Let Perrin and I know on Instagram. Join the conversation about what resonated, what you're excited to practice or pay attention to. And if you know somebody in your world who would really appreciate hearing this conversation, send this podcast their way. Thanks for being here as always. And until next time, stay centered.